Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Endeavor and watched the stars through the main screen. His ship had been traveling for 3 months to reach this part of space. They were looking for new planets that humans could live on. Jake had been a ship captain for 15 years, but he had never seen anything like what appeared on his screen now. 5 huge ships came out of nowhere. They were 10 times bigger than the Endeavor. The ships were made of some kind of metal that seemed to change colors. Blue lights ran along their sides like rivers. Jake had never seen ships that looked like this before. Lieutenant Amy Carter turned around from her station. Her face was pale, and her hands were shaking. She had been working on the ship for 2 years, and was very good at her job. Amy looked at Jake and said the words that changed everything for humanity. "Captain, they are trying to talk to us." Jake told Amy to put the message on the main screen. The image that appeared made everyone on the bridge stop breathing for a moment. A tall creature made of what looked like living crystal stood before them. The creature was 3 times taller than a human. Its body was clear like glass, but with colors moving inside it like oil on water. "I am Admiral Zixthora of the Galactic Empire," the creature said. Its voice sounded like music mixed with the sound of breaking glass. "We welcome you to our galaxy, little ones." The creature's words were kind, but Jake could hear something else in its voice. It sounded like an adult talking to a small child who had just learned to walk. Behind the crystal being, Jake could see other aliens. One looked like a giant spider made of metal. Another was a cloud of gas, with eyes floating inside it. Jake stepped forward and tried to look confident. "I am Captain Jake Morrison of the human exploration ship Endeavor. We come in peace from the planet Earth." Admiral Zixthara made a sound that Jake realized was laughter. The other aliens behind the Admiral also started making noises. The spider creature clicked its metal legs together very fast. The gas cloud changed colors from blue to yellow. "How cute," Admiral Zixthara said. "You still use fusion drives to move between stars. How long did it take you to reach this place, little human?" Jake felt his face get hot with anger, but he kept his voice calm. 3 months. This made the aliens laugh even harder. A new alien stepped forward. This one looked like a snake, but it was floating in the air and had 4 arms. Jake could see that it was wearing some kind of uniform with many symbols on it. 3 months, the snake alien said. "We could travel that distance in 3 minutes with our quantum fold drives. I am Commander Velton, tactical advisor to the Admiral. Tell me, do your people still fight wars with chemical explosives?" Ben Rodriguez, the chief engineer of the Endeavor, spoke up from his station. "Our weapons are more advanced than that," but his voice did not sound very sure. "Commander," Velton made a hissing sound that was probably laughter. "I'm sure they are, for primitive beings." Another alien came forward. This one looked almost like a human, but its skin was purple and it had 3 eyes. It wore a white coat covered with strange devices. "I am Dr. Kethmer, xenobiologist for the Imperial Science Division. We have studied many species like yours. You show the same patterns as all young races. You think your little machines and weapons make you special." Dr. Kethmer looked at something in its hands. Jake could not see what it was, but it looked like it was reading information about humans. "Your species has existed for only 200,000 years. The youngest member of our empire has been traveling between stars for over 1 million years. The hegemony, Admiral Zixthara's people, have been masters of space for 10 million years. Jake felt small when he heard these numbers. Humanity had only started traveling to other planets 50 years ago. Their first ship to another star had launched just 20 years ago. Admiral Zixthara raised one of its crystal arms. The other aliens became quiet. "Do not feel bad, little humans. All young species go through this stage. You think you are strong and smart. You think you can make your own way in the galaxy, but the universe is very big and very dangerous." The Admiral's voice became gentle, like a parent talking to a child. This is why the Galactic Empire exists. We protect young species like yours. We give you safe places to live. We teach you how to behave properly among the civilized races. Jake did not like where this conversation was going. What do you mean by that? Commander Velton answered before the Admiral could speak. It means you become a protected servant species. You will be given work that matches your abilities. Mining, construction, entertainment for the more advanced races. In return, we protect you from the dangers of space and teach you proper civilization. Amy Carter made a small sound of surprise. Jake could see that all his crew members were looking shocked. They had come to the stars hoping to find friends. Instead, they had found beings who wanted to make them slaves. And if we refuse? Jake asked. The aliens looked at each other and started laughing again. Dr. Kethmer shook its purple head with all three eyes. Refuse? Why would you refuse? This is the greatest honor a primitive species can receive. Admiral Zixthera leaned forward. Even through the screen, Jake could feel the creature's massive presence. Captain Morrison, your species controls 3 star systems. The Empire controls over 100 million star systems. We have weapons that can destroy suns. We have ships that can travel across the galaxy in days. We have technologies that your people cannot even imagine. The Admiral paused, and Jake could see colors swirling faster inside its crystal body. But we are not monsters. We will give you time to think about our generous offer. You have 1 standard galactic year to discuss this with your leaders. When we return, we expect your answer. The screen went dark. The 5 huge ships disappeared as quickly as they had arrived. Jake and his crew stood in silence for a long time. Finally, Amy Carter spoke. Captain, what do we do now? Jake looked at the stars on the main screen. Somewhere out there, an empire with millions of worlds was waiting for humanity's answer. They expected humans to bow down and accept slavery with grateful smiles. Jake, Morrison smiled for the first time since the aliens had appeared. Now we go home and tell Earth what we learned today. And then we show these aliens what humans do when someone tries to make us slaves. Ben Rodriguez looked confused. But Captain, did you hear what they said? They have weapons that can destroy suns. They control millions of worlds. Jake's smile got bigger. Yes, I heard them. I also heard something else. They think we're stupid. They think we're weak. They think we'll just give up without a fight. Jake turned to face his crew. They have no idea what they just did. They just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. Endeavor turned toward home, carrying news that would change everything for humanity. Behind them, the stars watched silently as 2 very different ideas of civilization prepared to meet. President Lisa Hamilton sat at the head of the long table in the Global Defense Council meeting room. Around her sat the most important leaders from every nation on Earth. The room was quiet except for the sound of people breathing and the soft hum of computers. Everyone had just finished watching the recording that Captain Morrison had brought back from his meeting with the Galactic Empire. General Sam Cooper was the first person to speak. He was a tall man with gray hair, who had been a soldier for 30 years. Madame President, we need to start building weapons right now. If what these aliens said is true, we have less than 1 year before they come back. Admiral Kate Foster shook her head. She was the leader of Earth's Space Navy, which had only 20 ships. General, did you hear what they said? They have weapons that can destroy suns. Our biggest nuclear bombs would be like throwing rocks at a tank. Dr. Alex Thompson adjusted his glasses and looked at his notes. He was Earth's best scientist and had spent his whole life studying space technology. The aliens' technology is far beyond ours. Their ships can travel across the galaxy in days. Our fastest ship takes months just to reach the next star system. Dr. Maria Santos, who worked with Dr. Thompson, added, but we did learn something important from the recording. Did anyone else notice how they talked to Captain Morrison? Ryan Brooks, the chief intelligence officer, leaned forward. He was a quiet man who noticed things that other people missed. You mean how they treated him like a child? Exactly, Dr. Santos said. They were not angry or afraid. They were amused. They think we are so weak that we could never be a real threat to them. President Hamilton looked around the table. So you think they are not taking us seriously? I think they have never met a species that fought back, Ryan Brooks said. Think about what they told us. They said all young species go through the same stage. They think they know exactly what we will do. Colonel Steve Johnson had been quiet during the meeting, but now he spoke up. He was the leader of Earth's special forces and had fought in wars on 3 different planets. What do we know about how they fight? Captain Morrison, who had been invited to the meeting, stood up. They showed us recordings of their ships in battle. Everything they do follows exact patterns. Their ships move in perfect formations. They attack in the same order every time. It's like they are following a book of rules that never changes. Admiral Foster frowned. That doesn't make sense. Why would they fight that way? Dr. Thompson had an idea. What if they have been so powerful for so long that they never needed to change? If you always win using the same methods, why would you try new ones? Ryan Brooks was looking at his computer screen. I've been studying the information we got about the different species in their empire. There are hundreds of them, but they all seem to follow the same basic rules for everything they do. Politics, science, war, even art. So they are predictable, President Hamilton asked. More than that, Ryan said. I think they might be stuck. When you have millions of worlds and billions of species all following the same rules, it becomes impossible to change anything quickly. Dr. Nicole Adams, who studied how different cultures think, had been listening carefully. There's something else. Did you notice that they offered to teach us proper civilization? They believe there is only one right way to live and think. General Cooper looked confused. How does that help us? They still have bigger guns. Colonel Johnson smiled. Sir, bigger guns don't always win wars. Sometimes the side that can think faster wins instead. President Hamilton stood up. What are you suggesting, Colonel? I'm suggesting that we do what humans have always done when someone stronger tries to bully us. We fight smart instead of fighting fair. Dr. Santos nodded. The aliens expect us to either surrender or try to copy their technology. What if we do neither? What do you mean? Admiral Foster asked. What if we fight them using methods they have never seen before? Methods that are not in their rule books. Ryan Brooks was getting excited. That could work. They have been using the same battle tactics for thousands of years. They probably have no idea how to deal with enemies who don't follow the same rules. Dr. Thompson was already making notes. We would need to develop new technologies, not copies of their technology, but completely different approaches to the same problems. Colonel Johnson agreed. And new tactics, ways of fighting that they would never expect, because no civilized species would use them. President Hamilton looked around the room. She could see that people were starting to get hopeful instead of scared. How long would we need? They gave us 1 year, General Cooper said. That's not very long to build a military that can fight an entire galaxy. We don't need to fight the entire galaxy, Ryan Brooks said. We just need to fight well enough to make them respect us. Admiral Foster was thinking, what if we don't try to fight their main fleets at all? What if we make it too expensive for them to conquer us? You mean guerrilla warfare on a galactic scale? Colonel Johnson asked. Exactly. Hit their supply lines, attack their communication systems, make them chase us instead of us chasing them. Dr. Adams had another idea. We should also study their psychology. If we understand how they think, we can predict what they will do. President Hamilton made her decision. All right, everyone. We have 1 year to prepare for the most important war in human history. General Cooper, start working with Colonel Johnson on new military tactics. Admiral Foster, I want every ship we have modified for unconventional warfare. She turned to the scientists. Dr. Thompson, Dr. Santos, I want new technologies that the aliens have never seen before. Dr. Adams, I want complete psychological profiles of every alien species we met. And Mr. Brooks, she said to the intelligence chief, I want you to figure out everything you can about how their empire works. Find their weaknesses. Ryan Brooks smiled. Madam President, I think I already found their biggest weakness. What's that? They think they know everything about us, but they actually know nothing. They looked at our technology and assumed they understood our entire species. They never bothered to study how humans think or how we solve problems. President Hamilton nodded. Then let's show them what they missed. Over the next few days, news of the alien encounter spread across Earth. Most people were scared when they first heard about the Galactic Empire, but when they learned about the government's plan to fight back, something amazing happened. Factories that had been making cars started making weapons instead. Scientists who had been working on different projects all started working together. Engineers who had been building bridges began designing spaceships. Tim Clark had been working in a steel factory for 20 years. When he heard that Earth needed new kinds of weapons, he and his co-workers began working 18 hours a day to produce special metal that could be used in space battles. Jenny Miller was an engineer who had designed buildings. Now she was helping to design new types of spaceships that could hide from alien sensors by copying the way Earth animals camouflaged themselves. All across Earth, humans were doing what they had always done when faced with a big challenge. They were working together, sharing ideas, and refusing to give up. The aliens had made one very big mistake. They thought humans were just another primitive species that would either surrender or fight using the same old methods that had failed for millions of other species. But humans were different. Humans had never learned to follow rules when the rules didn't work. Humans had survived by being creative, stubborn, and willing to try things that others said were impossible. The Galactic Empire was about to learn why humans had never been conquered by anyone, not even by other humans for very long. They were about to learn that the most dangerous species in the galaxy was not the one with the biggest weapons, but the one that refused to fight fair. Exactly 1 year later, Admiral Zixtara returned to human space with a fleet of 50 Imperial warships. Each ship was massive and filled with enough firepower to destroy an entire planet. The Admiral expected to find grateful humans waiting to surrender and accept their place as servants in the Galactic Empire. Instead, the Admiral found empty space. "Where are they?" Commander Velton asked, from his position on the bridge. The snake-like alien was looking at his sensors with confusion. There should be space stations here. The humans had 3 colonies in this system. Dr. Kethmer was scanning the area with his scientific equipment. "I'm detecting no signs of human activity. It's as if they simply disappeared." Admiral Zixtara's crystal body was glowing with colors that showed annoyance. "Scan the entire system. They must be hiding somewhere." While the Imperial fleet spread out to search, they did not notice the small human ship that was watching them from inside an asteroid field. Captain Jake Morrison now commanded a vessel that looked nothing like the Endeavor he had piloted a year ago. The new ship was called the Phoenix, and it had been built using principles that no alien engineer had ever considered. Instead of trying to make it bigger and more powerful than alien ships, human engineers had made it smaller and smarter. Lieutenant Amy Carter was still his communications officer, but now she was operating equipment that could listen to alien transmissions from across an entire star system. "Captain, I'm picking up their communications. They're confused about where we went." Ben Rodriguez had also been promoted. He was now chief engineer of the entire human fleet, but he had chosen to stay on the Phoenix for this mission. "All systems are ready, Captain. The new engines are working perfectly. Jake smiled as he watched the huge Imperial ships moving slowly through space in their perfect formations. Amy, send them our message. Amy pressed a button and transmitted a simple message. To the Imperial fleet. We studied you too. On the Imperial flagship, the message appeared on Admiral Zixtera's main screen. At first, the Admiral did not understand what it meant. Then small human ships began appearing all around the Imperial fleet. The human ships came out of asteroid fields, from behind moons, and from places where Imperial sensors said there was nothing. They moved in ways that made no sense according to established space combat theory. Commander Jack Williams was piloting a ship called the Falcon. He flew his vessel through the rings of a gas giant, using the ice and rock to hide his approach. When he emerged, he was directly behind an Imperial cruiser that had never detected him. Captain Diane Ross commanded a ship that had been disguised to look like a piece of space junk. The aliens had scanned it several times, but never realized it was actually a warship. Now she activated her weapons and began attacking the Imperial fleet from a direction they never expected. Impossible, Commander Velton hissed as he watched his sensors. Those ships are using gravitational forces to change direction. No civilized species would risk such dangerous maneuvers. Dr. Kethmer was even more confused. They're using stellar radiation to power some kind of energy weapon. The heat should destroy their ships, but somehow they're channeling it safely. What the aliens did not understand was that humans had spent the year learning to fight in ways that were considered impossible by Imperial standards. Human engineers had discovered that many things the aliens thought were too dangerous to try actually worked very well if you were willing to take risks. Ben Rodriguez had developed a new type of engine that used the gravity of planets and stars to move ships faster than normal engines could. It was dangerous because one mistake would destroy the ship, but it allowed human vessels to appear and disappear in ways that confused alien computers. The Imperial fleet tried to respond using their standard battle tactics. They formed into defensive formations that had worked for thousands of years against every enemy they had ever fought. But humans refused to attack these formations in the expected way. Instead of flying directly at the Imperial ships, human pilots like Commander Kevin Hayes used the cover of space debris to attack from angles that should have been impossible. They fired weapons and then immediately hid behind asteroids or moons before the aliens could fire back. Captain Michelle Torres commanded a group of ships that had been converted from mining vessels. They carried equipment that had been designed to break apart asteroids, but Ben Rodriguez had modified it to work as weapons against alien ships. The most confusing thing for the Imperial forces was that humans seemed to be using their own environment as a weapon. They would lure Imperial ships near unstable asteroids and then cause them to explode. They used the magnetic fields of planets to disrupt alien electronics. They even used solar flares as cover for their attacks. This is not how space battles are supposed to work, Admiral Zixtera said, as another Imperial ship reported damage from a human attack that had come from inside a comet's tail. Commander Velton was trying to understand human tactics by studying the battle recordings. Sir, they are not following any recognized pattern of warfare. It's like they are making up new tactics during the battle. That was exactly what humans were doing. Colonel Steve Johnson had trained human commanders to think for themselves instead of following a set of predetermined rules. When one tactic stopped working, they immediately tried something else. The Imperial fleet was larger and more powerful, but they were designed to fight enemies who followed the same basic rules of space combat that had been used throughout the galaxy for millions of years. Humans had thrown out those rules and created their own. After 6 hours of fighting, Admiral Zixtera realized that his fleet was being damaged faster than they were damaging the humans. Imperial ships were built to fight other big ships in open space. They were not designed to fight small, fast ships that attacked from hiding places and then disappeared. Send a message to the human commander, Admiral Zixtera ordered. "I want to speak with them." Captain Morrison received the message and agreed to talk. His image appeared on the Imperial flagship's main screen. The Admiral could see that the human looked tired but confident. "You fight in a dishonorable way," Admiral Zixtera said. "Civilized species do not hide behind asteroids and use natural phenomena as weapons." Jake Morrison's response surprised the Admiral. "You're right, civilized. Species don't fight that way. But we never claimed to be civilized by your standards. Then you admit you are primitive barbarians." Jake's smile was not friendly. "No, Admiral. We're something you've never encountered before. We're a species that refuses to lose just because someone else has bigger guns." Dr. Kethmer appeared on the screen next to the Admiral. "Your tactics violate every principle of proper warfare. You could have killed your own pilots with those dangerous maneuvers. Some of them volunteered for missions they knew they might not survive," Jake said quietly. "That's another thing you don't understand about humans. We choose to take risks for things we believe in." Commander Velton was getting angry. "You cannot win this war with these cowardly tactics. We have millions of ships. We can bring fleets that will block out the stars." Jake's smile became wider. "Then you'll have millions of ships trying to catch shadows in asteroid fields. You'll have millions of ships that can't find enemies who refuse to fight fair. You'll have millions of ships commanded by officers who have never learned to think for themselves when their rule books don't work." Admiral Zixtera realized that the human was right. The Imperial fleet could destroy any human ship in direct combat, but the humans refused to fight directly. They attacked and vanished like ghosts. They used the battlefield itself as a weapon. They did things that no sane military commander would attempt. "What do you want from us?" Admiral Zixtera asked. "We want you to leave our space and never come back," Jake said. "We want you to tell your empire that humans are not interested in being anyone's servants. And if we refuse..." Jake's expression became very serious. "Then we'll teach the entire galaxy that the Galactic Empire can be beaten by a species you thought was too primitive to matter. We'll show every servant species in your empire that they don't have to accept slavery just because you have bigger ships." The communication ended, and Admiral Zixtera stared at the empty screen. For the first time in the long history of the Galactic Empire, a primitive species had not only refused to surrender, but had actually hurt an Imperial fleet in battle. The Admiral gave the order to retreat, but as the Imperial ships prepared to leave, every officer on every ship was thinking the same thing. If humans could fight the Empire and survive, what would happen when other species learned about it? The news of Admiral Zixtera's defeat traveled across the Galactic Empire faster than anyone expected. Within days, every species in the Empire knew that humans had fought Imperial ships and forced them to retreat. This had never happened before in the long history of galactic civilization. Supreme Admiral Korthvac was the highest military commander in the Empire. He was a being made of living metal who had won battles on 10,000 worlds. When he heard about the defeat, he was furious and embarrassed. No primitive species had ever made the Empire look weak before. "Bring me everything we know about these humans," Supreme Admiral Korthvac commanded his staff. His metal body glowed red with anger as he spoke. General Zerkith, a veteran warrior from the Assault Corps, presented the battle reports. "Sir, the humans used tactics that are not in any of our military databases. They hid in places we would never think to look. They used natural space phenomena as weapons." Commander Rixtala, who was known throughout the Empire as a tactical genius, had been studying the human battle recordings for days. "Supreme Admiral, these humans fight like no species we have ever encountered. They seem to make up new tactics during the battle itself." Supreme Admiral Korthvac's metal fingers drummed on his command table. "Then we will show them what happens when a young species challenges the might of the Empire. Prepare the war fleet." The Empire assembled the largest military force it had. ever created. 5,000 warships from dozens of different species joined together under Supreme Admiral Korthvak's command. Each ship was a masterpiece of Imperial technology, capable of destroying entire cities with a single shot. But while the Empire was gathering its massive fleet, humans were doing what they did best, learning and adapting. Dr. Alex Thompson had been studying the alien technology that human ships had managed to scan during the first battle. "I think I understand how their weapons work," Dr. Thompson told President Hamilton during a secure communication. "They use quantum energy fields that are very powerful, but also very predictable. If we can create interference patterns, we might be able to disrupt their targeting systems." Dr. Maria Santos had been working on a different problem. The aliens' ships are incredibly strong, but they all follow the same basic design principles. They're built to fight other ships that use similar technology. I don't think they know how to deal with weapons that work on completely different principles. Captain Morrison had been promoted to Admiral of the Human Defense Fleet, but he still spent most of his time on ships instead of behind a desk. He was currently on the bridge of a new vessel called the Defiance, which had been built using hybrid technology that combined human engineering with alien principles they had learned to copy. "How many ships do we have now?" Admiral Morrison asked his new communications officer, Lieutenant Danny Wright. 87 combat-ready vessels, sir," Danny replied. "Plus about 200 converted civilian ships that can fight if necessary." Ben Rodriguez, now the chief engineer for all human military technology, was working on the bridge with a team of technicians. "Admiral, we've finished installing the new weapon systems. These guns work by disrupting the quantum fields that hold alien ship hulls together. We don't need to punch through their armor. We can make their armor fall apart instead." Admiral Morrison nodded. "What about the new communication systems?" Lieutenant Amy Carter, who was now in charge of all human intelligence operations, smiled. "Sir, we can now intercept and decode Imperial communications in real time. We'll know what they're planning to do before they do it." The Imperial War Fleet arrived in human space 2 months after the first battle. Supreme Admiral Korthvak expected to crush human resistance in a few hours. Instead, he found himself fighting a completely different kind of war. Human ships appeared and disappeared throughout the star system like ghosts. They attacked Imperial supply convoys that were traveling through areas that should have been safe. They destroyed communication relays that connected the Imperial fleet to the rest of the Empire. Captain Kevin Hayes commanded a squadron of small ships that specialized in hit-and-run attacks. His pilots would strike at Imperial formations and then vanish into asteroid fields before the aliens could respond. Colonel Patricia Lee led ground forces that attacked Imperial bases on planets and moons. Her soldiers used camouflage and stealth, technology that made them nearly invisible to alien sensors. They would sabotage Imperial equipment and then disappear into caves or forests before anyone knew they had been there. The war spread across multiple star systems as humans employed tactics that confused and frustrated Imperial commanders. Every time the Empire tried to use their overwhelming firepower, they found that there was nothing to shoot at. Human forces would attack and then melt away like smoke. Captain Michelle Torres now commanded a group of ships that looked like merchant vessels but were actually heavily armed warships. She would approach Imperial fleets pretending to be a neutral trader, and then attack at close range before jumping away. The most frustrating thing for Imperial forces was that humans seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at the same time. They would attack an Imperial base on one planet and then strike at a convoy in a completely different star system on the same day. "How are they moving so fast?" General Zarketh asked during a strategy meeting. "Our intelligence says they don't have quantum fold drives." Commander Rick Stala had been trying to understand human logistics for weeks. "Sir, I think they're using a network of hidden bases and supply caches. They don't need to travel long distances, because they have equipment waiting for them wherever they want to fight." Supreme Admiral Korthvac was discovering that commanding the largest fleet in Imperial history was useless when the enemy refused to engage in large-scale battles. They are fighting like criminals and pirates, not like a proper military force. Perhaps. That is exactly the point, Commander Rixtala said quietly. They have studied our tactics and found ways to make our strengths irrelevant. As the war continued, something unexpected began to happen throughout the Galactic Empire. Species that had been conquered and enslaved for thousands of years began to hear stories about humans who were successfully fighting Imperial forces on the planet Cathbar. A group of reptilian beings who had been servants for their entire lives began to whisper about humans who refused to surrender. On the mining world of Drowmouth, workers who had never seen the sky began to dream about freedom. Dr. Cathmar, the alien scientist who had met humans during their first encounter, sent a secret report to the Imperial Science Council. The humans are not just fighting our military forces. They are spreading ideas that could be dangerous to Imperial stability. Other species are beginning to ask why they must accept servitude when humans refuse to do so. Some Imperial officers began to privately question whether this war was worth fighting. Commander Velton had been studying human tactics and found himself admiring their creativity and determination. They fight with honor in their own way, Velton told Admiral Zixtera during a private conversation. They protect their civilians. They treat prisoners with respect. They risk their own lives to save their comrades. Perhaps they are not as primitive as we believed. Admiral Zixtera had been thinking the same thing. I have fought in wars across the galaxy for 3,000 years. I have never encountered enemies who fight with such intelligence and courage while being so badly outnumbered. Meanwhile, humans continued to learn and adapt. Dr. Thompson's research teams developed new technologies by combining human innovation with alien science they had captured. They created hybrid weapons that worked on principles Imperial scientists had never imagined. The Empire's greatest strength was becoming its greatest weakness. The vast hierarchy that controlled millions of worlds was too slow to adapt to an enemy that changed tactics every day. By the time Imperial commanders figured out how to counter a human strategy, humans had already moved on to something completely different. After 6 months of fighting, Supreme Admiral Korthvac realized that his massive fleet was being slowly destroyed by an enemy he could barely see. Human forces were like water flowing around rocks, impossible to grasp and impossible to stop. The Empire had expected to crush a primitive rebellion in a few days. Instead, they found themselves fighting the most difficult war in their history, against an enemy that refused to follow any of the rules of civilized warfare. For the first time in galactic history, the Galactic Empire was losing a war. The war had been going on for 8 months when the Galactic Empire decided to use its ultimate weapon. The Planet Killer was a massive ship the size of a small moon that could destroy entire worlds with a single shot. It had ended dozens of rebellions throughout galactic history. No species had ever survived its use. Supreme Admiral Korthvac stood on the bridge of the Planet Killer and looked at the main screen showing Earth in the distance. The blue and green world looked peaceful and beautiful, but Korthvac no longer cared about beauty. He only wanted to end this embarrassing war. Charge the primary weapon, Supreme Admiral Korthvac commanded. Today, we finish what should have ended months ago. The massive ship began to glow with power as its weapon systems came online. Energy readings that could be detected across the entire star system showed that the Empire was preparing to use its most terrible weapon. On Earth, President Lisa Hamilton watched the approaching doom on her screens. She knew that every human in the galaxy was looking to her for leadership in what might be humanity's final hour. "Admiral Morrison," she said into her communicator, "are your people in position?" Admiral Jake Morrison was in space aboard his flagship, the Phoenix, along with every remaining human warship. They had been preparing for this moment for weeks. ever since their spies had learned about the Empire's plan to use the planet killer. "We're ready, Madam President," Admiral Morrison replied. "But I want you to know that this plan is even crazier than anything we've tried before." President Hamilton smiled despite the situation. "Admiral, we're humans. Crazy plans are what we do best." The human fleet approached the planet killer, using a formation that made no sense, according to any military doctrine in the galaxy. Instead of trying to attack the massive ship's weapons, they flew directly toward its command center. "What are they doing?" General Zarkith asked, as he watched the human ships on his sensors. "Are they planning a suicide attack?" Commander Rix was studying the human approach pattern. "Sir, I don't think they're trying to destroy the planet killer. I think they're trying to capture it." Supreme Admiral Korthvac laughed, which sounded like metal grinding against metal. "Impossible. No species has ever captured an Imperial planet killer. The security systems alone would kill any boarding party. But humans had spent months studying Imperial technology and learning how it worked. Ben Rodriguez had discovered that Imperial security systems were designed to stop attacks from other Imperial species. They were not designed to stop humans, who used completely different approaches to technology. Captain Kevin Hayes led the first wave of human ships through the planet killer's defensive barriers. His pilots used techniques they had learned from studying how Earthbirds flew through storms. They moved in patterns that confused the Imperial targeting computers. Lieutenant Amy Carter was coordinating the attack from the Phoenix. Her communication systems allowed human forces to work together in ways that Imperial commanders could not understand or predict. Boarding teams away, Captain Michelle Torres reported as small human ships attached themselves to the planet hull. Human soldiers in special suits began cutting through the Imperial ship's armor using tools that Ben Rodriguez had designed. The Imperial defenders inside the planet killer tried to stop the human boarding parties, but they had never fought enemies who used the ship's own systems against them. Humans had learned to turn Imperial security measures into weapons that helped them instead of stopping them. Colonel Patricia Lee led her soldiers through the planet killer's corridors using maps that human spies had stolen months earlier. They moved through the massive ship like they knew every passage and room, because they did. Impossible. Supreme Admiral Korthvac said as reports came in that humans were successfully taking control of key areas throughout his ship. "How do they know our security codes?" Commander Rixtala had figured it out. "Sir, they must have been studying our technology for months. They know how our systems work better than we thought possible." That was exactly what had happened. Dr. Alex Thompson and Dr. Maria Santos had been working with captured Imperial equipment for almost a year. They had learned to understand alien technology by approaching it from directions that Imperial scientists had never considered. Within 6 hours, human forces had taken control of the planet killer. Supreme Admiral Korthvac found himself surrounded by human soldiers in the ship's command center. For the first time in his long life, he was a prisoner. Admiral Morrison appeared on the main screen of every Imperial ship in the system. Behind him, humans could be seen operating the controls of the galaxy's most powerful weapon. "This is Admiral Jake Morrison of the Human Defense Fleet," he announced. "We now control the Imperial planet killer. We want to make something very clear to everyone listening." Admiral Morrison's voice was calm, but his words carried across the galaxy to every world in the Empire. "We didn't want to fight you. We wanted to join you as equals. We wanted to share our ideas and learn from yours. But you laughed at us instead of listening to us." The image changed to show Dr. Maria Santos, who had been chosen to speak for all of humanity. "Now you know what humans do when someone underestimates us. We learn everything we can about our enemies. We adapt to overcome any advantage they have, and we never, ever give up." Dr. Santos continued, "But we are not your enemies unless you choose to make us enemies. We have captured your ultimate weapon, but we will not use it to destroy your worlds. Instead, We want to show you something that no species in your empire has ever seen. The planet killer's weapon systems powered down, instead of preparing to destroy planets. The massive ship began broadcasting a message across every communication channel in the galaxy. President Lisa Hamilton appeared on screens throughout the empire. My name is Lisa Hamilton, and I speak for the human species. Today, we offer you something that your empire has never given to anyone, a choice. Her words reached millions of worlds where conquered species had lived as servants for thousands of years. You can choose to remain part of an empire that rules through fear and force, or you can choose to join us in building something new, a galaxy where different species work together as equals instead of masters and slaves. The effect of this message was immediate and dramatic. On world after world, species that had accepted imperial rule for millennia began to ask questions they had never dared to ask before. On the mining planet Drelmuth, workers stopped their machines and looked up at the sky for the first time in their lives. On Kethver, the reptilian servants began to imagine what freedom might feel like. Admiral Zixtera, who had been watching the events from his flagship, made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. He opened a communication channel to Admiral Morrison. Admiral Morrison, this is Admiral Zixtera. I request permission to come aboard your ship. When the crystal alien materialized on the Phoenix, he found himself facing not just Admiral Morrison, but representatives from dozens of species that had already decided to leave the Empire and join the humans. You have done something I thought was impossible, Admiral Zixtara said to the human admiral. You have made me question everything I believed about civilization and strength. Admiral Morrison extended his hand in the human gesture of friendship. Admiral, we didn't want to prove that we were stronger than you. We wanted to prove that different doesn't mean inferior. Admiral Zixtera looked at the human's outstretched hand for a long moment, then reached out with one crystal arm to touch. Perhaps it is time for the galaxy to learn new ways of thinking. Over the following months, the Galactic Empire began to change in ways that no one had predicted. Some imperial leaders retreated to distant worlds, unwilling to accept that their perfect system had been challenged by a species they had considered primitive. But others, led by Admiral Zixtara and Commander Rixstala, began working with humans to create new forms of cooperation between species. They discovered that when different ways of thinking were combined instead of suppressed, amazing things became possible. Dr. Alex Thompson found himself working with imperial scientists who had been bound by rigid thinking for millennia. Together, they developed technologies that neither humans nor aliens could have created alone. The planet killer was converted into a mobile research station where beings from hundreds of different worlds worked together to solve problems that had seemed impossible before. President Hamilton established the Galactic Cooperation Council, where every species had an equal voice, regardless of how advanced their technology was or how many worlds they controlled. The final scene of this great change took place 1 year after the capture of the planet killer. Admiral Morrison and Admiral Zixtara stood together on the observation deck of the research station, watching as ships from dozens of different species arrived for the first truly free galactic conference in history. You know, Admiral Zix said, when we first met your species, we laughed because we thought you were primitive and weak. Admiral Morrison smiled. And now I understand that the most primitive thing in the galaxy was our belief that there was only one way to be civilized. Through the observation windows, they could see something that had never existed before in galactic history. Children from dozens of different species playing together, learning from each other, and creating new games that combined the best ideas from all their cultures. The Galactic Empire had greeted humanity with laughter, thinking they were too simple to matter. But in the end, it was the sound of different species working and playing together that echoed across the stars, promising a future that no one had dared to imagine before humans showed them it was possible.